Hello there, guys, and welcome back to Bright Founders Talk from Tele, an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Today, guys, we've got a new guest with us. I'm going to absolutely butcher the name. Just before we got on, I tried to pronounce the name, but absolutely not successful. French names, you know what I'm like. So I'm going to give our speaker today the floor to introduce himself. He is co-founder and the CTO of StackOne. So, floor is all yours.
So Guillaume, CTO and co-founder of StackOne. StackOne is a pretty new startup. I actually created the company with my co-founder and a long-term friend, Omer, back in February. And we are essentially a B2B integration platform. We call ourselves the next-gen integration platform with incumbents that were more around workflow automation, like Workato, maybe Tray and things like that. And we're next-gen because we are a unified API. And also we use AI heavily to kind of scale the platform and make it as seamless as possible.
Nice. Okay, what I want to do before we get started, just tell me a little bit more about yourself. So I'm going to call you G, as we said just before we started the interview, just because it's a little bit more easy for me, especially whilst I've got this cold. So G, just tell me a little bit more about who are you? Who is the man behind the machine? And it really is behind the machine, CTO.
Yeah, so I myself, I said I'm a software engineer at heart. I'm a builder at heart. I love coding. And I actually started doing a CS degree back in France. And my first job was directly after moving to London in another sector in quantitative analysis for an energy trading desk, which was very, very different world. So the finance world, which is, London is, I guess, a finance capital in Europe. So still very, very close to what I ended up doing in other roles around. It's all about data, collecting data. How do you collect data from variously documented API? And eventually I joined B2B SaaS companies. First startup called Maximizer back in the day that was acquired by Oracle. And then I created my first company in 2017, actually, with the same co-founder that I've created this new company. And eventually I joined a company called Unified, became VP of engineering of that company until its acquisition by Publicis earlier in the year. So went through kind of the acquisition journey there before starting against StackOne with the same co-founder of my first company. So I'd say second company I co-founded. I like actually the B2B SaaS sector. I think there is various kind of good ideas there. I think, in some ways it's easier than consumer application. And I think it's truer or it's easier to get started because you can start a company with just one paying customer, which is harder to do an actual company with one paying customer on the B2C side.
Absolutely.
So really passionate about the B2B kind of SaaS market. I wouldn't say I'm an indie hacker, actually. I mean, we already around 10 people at StackOne and we're growing. But I've definitely I love that space as well. And doing B2B SaaS has never been easier. I would say nowadays, and I really love the whole kind of journey around building software. I'd like to stay software engineering forever, even if with scale, it always makes it a bit harder. Right? I think my previous role before the acquisition, it was a lot more about managing people than creating code, but that's what you get with sometimes success.
Amazing. Absolutely. Tell me, G, a little bit more. You said you're from France. Obviously, you moved to the UK. Yeah. Tell me the differences that you've noticed in the way that French people do business and British people do business. What have you seen?
My views may be a bit antiquated because I have left France 10 years ago.
Okay.
So many things have changed a bit there, and I haven't worked for French. Well, I haven't worked in France since then. I did feel like, I think in the UK, I would say as a single person at the time, especially when I moved, willing to put in the time, the opportunities were greater. There were more innovation happening, whether on the financial sector, fintech, a lot of great fintech companies in the UK, but also just generally in tech. At the time when I moved, or even I would say still now, London is the best place to do a tech company in Europe. I would say there is a great access to talent, incredible universities. So when you're recruiting, you really get access to a lot of very, very smart people that also come internationally to the UK and to London specifically. So I've worked with incredibly smart people. And in France, my experience was more like a small internship when I was in university and things like that. I did feel like a few of the companies I were at were a lot more about, it's a job, lot less career oriented. And I think, in various stages of your life, it can be very good, like that. I think it's probably easier as maybe if you have a family, etc., and a bit older to work in France. But if you want to move fast, if you want to grow your career, if you want to learn a huge amount, I think London was, and in my opinion, still is the place to be.
Interesting. Okay, so you haven't seen any kind of implications since Brexit or anything for a reason as to move outside of
I'm not saying that. I do think it's a lot less attractive of a proposition, even like from a recruitment perspective. I've been I've been hiring for the last 5 years for various roles, and it's made things a lot more difficult. Like even, if I knew people back in France, I'd be like trying to convince them to move was a lot harder than it used to be before Brexit. That's entirely the case. I also know from an international perspective of attracting talent even to study in the UK, maybe bit more difficult. So it has definitely worsened the value proposition of London or the United Kingdom as like a tech startup hub. I do think so. That being said, I still think nothing has taken its place fully yet. Nothing is as big as London is from a talent pool perspective and a funding perspective, innovation perspective.
Very interesting, very interesting. Okay, let's go more into what you're doing at StackOne. So let's talk about that original MVP. What did it look like? 8 months ago, I believe you started out, yeah?
Yeah, so the MVP was started at the end of last year. So especially I was still working for another company, and I kind of worked with the contractor to get that going. The MVP was all about, okay, we know the goal. At Tilify, I needed an integration platform. So I really was a potential customer while still finishing my role in my previous job. So I kind of had a good idea what we needed to build. And on top of that, the integration market is not new. So we had a bar to meet before we could even innovate. So a lot of the MVP was like, okay, let's meet that bar so we can go like to the innovation stage, to the competitive advantage stage. That was making decision in terms of technology. That was just, the UI was the least amount of focused, I would say, initially, the user interface. Our main product is an API. So our user interface or control plane was very much more for technical people and to be able to monitor the API. So that didn't take as much of the focus initially. I mean, when you're doing product market fit, I tend to think that unless somehow your value prop is just to be a 10x better user interface, you probably don't benefit from spending a lot on design. That being said, as soon as you get, customers that are using the platform more, I think that switched into happen fairly quickly after the MVP stage. But the MVP stage was really much more about the scalability. Also, the value proposition of our platform is that we are a real-time unified API, which is rare and as maybe non-existing in the unified API market for specific technical constraints that are very valid. So we had to validate during the MVP stage that we could make such a product. It was doable to make integration real-time in a unified manner, which was very novel in the space. So there was a bit of like validating those initial assumptions that we could make that product, and second, just like putting something in the hand of potential customers as early as possible. So yeah, that was the MVP stage, which really started at the end of last year, and really we started putting in the end of users in March. So it was like three months out.
And G, were you actually were you impressed? Were you pleased with how your MVP worked out?
Initially, before you get any real users on it, you're like, hey, it's really, really good. And then you get users on it, and you get the scale issues, and you get I have to refactor this bit and this bit. So I think, retrospectively, I think it was definitely maybe even more advanced than it needed to be. I do strongly believe in the idea that you need to put your product out as early as possible, get in the end of actual users. It's a potential issue if you're trying to disrupt the market where there are a lot of incumbents players, because there is again that bar that I was talking about where you need to meet that bar before you innovate. And if your MVP doesn't, you're going to disappoint and you're not going to be able to replace the incumbents. So there was a bit of that constant battle of like, how much do we want to do at least more than our competitors do, and how much we just want to have it out in the end of users and getting feedback and improving it, right? So that was that constant battle at the beginning. Eventually, I think I was pretty satisfied. I think we would have had to refactor something. We had to scale something up, optimize some cost as soon as we got like really, really large scale usage. I think one of our first customers was doing out of the box. We went from 0 to millions of calls every day in the first day, and that obviously you discover some scalability issues. But I think overall it went okay, as good as I could have expected.
It's something I hear from you guys on this show quite a lot is if you are happy with your MVP, like if you think it was perfect, you probably waited too long to bring it to market, basically. Yeah, you need to go out, and some people tell me that you need to kind of be ashamed of your MVP a little bit, but happy that you got it out. So
no, that's absolutely right. I think I would say it's a spectrum. It depends on the market you're trying to attack, you're trying to sell to, what they're already using. But I would generally say that the problem you're going to do, otherwise you're going to spend time on what you think is important, but what the person I really want to pay you money thinks is important might be different. So you need to really prioritize properly, and the best way to do that is to get actual user feedback.
Nice. Okay. With the ever kind of evolving tech landscape, what emerging trends or technologies do you foresee having kind of a significant impact on the SaaS industry, and how is StackOne going to adapt to these changes?
So I think, as most of the software industry right now, the LLM generative AI trend is going to be hugely impactful. It's actually one of the main reasons why I also wanted to do this company, because I believe that doing a startup generally, regardless of the space, can be done very, very differently with generative AI. You can do it more lean, can be more scrappy. You can compete more with like 100 or 1,000-person companies, even with 10 people, because you can leverage LLMs and generative AI more natively within your company. And it's not just for building your product, it's like for sales, for marketing, for recruitment. And that's usually transformative on how to do a company. And I honestly think that also makes it way more fun. I think this trend is far from, in some aspects, it's overblown, like what generative AI can do today. But I think what it can do tomorrow will be so incredible. And even nowadays, if you look at the automated autonomous agents that are being developed, they're really, really impressive. You see a lot of innovative companies adopting it for various reasons. And I think it is impacting the integration market. We actually leverage AI today, and particularly LLMs, to build integration automatically, to try to self-heal integrations, and also create automated tests, etc. So it has really, really helped products like ours, and we think we're going to be able to have thousands of integrations within 1 year instead of 10. That's the difference that LLMs allow us to have. So huge focus on that. I think I'm a huge believer that it's going to transform most companies. And I do think today there's a lot of distribution issues around AI tools that a lot of people just don't even have their hands on it right now. But I think if everyone was able to access every agent that exists out there, productivity would go like 10x in most companies.
Tell me a little bit more about the difficulties of the hiring. You said, obviously, with Brexit, it's been a little bit more difficult to persuade people to come over, more so than it was. As a startup, as a fairly new company on the block as well, how do you convince people to join your journey, to join your the risk, because it's always a risk at the beginning? How do you do that?
I think you need to start with the people you trust and know, and that are the best performers that you worked with in the past. It's the least risky approach to recruiting initially, to starting up your team, is you go with the best people you've ever worked with, and you convince them. The way you convince them, I think in the current environment, it's definitely a lot harder than 2-3 years ago, because funding around startup is a bit harder to get. Then people think maybe it's not the time to take a risk. So you got kind of it's kind of a bipolar approach today, where it's like, in a way, startups look scarier nowadays if you have a stable job than maybe it would have 2-3 years ago. But at the same time, a lot of jobs aren't as stable as they used to be. So there have been a lot of layoffs. So you have access to incredible talent that otherwise would have been siphoned off by the Facebook and the Google of the world at a fairly competitive price. And 2-3 years ago, most startups were priced in out of the best talent pool because of the large tech companies bumping everyone's salaries. So I think now there is actually a pool of talent we wouldn't have access to before because of the the big layoffs that have occurred. But I would still say initially what you need to do is get the people you know, the best people you know. And if you can't sell the people you worked with on your company and on yourself, I think you have some questions to ask yourself at that point. I think Brexit and to some extent, I think it's not as bad right now. If you make a company, you have access to a lot of talent for people at various layers and companies that have done a kind of hiring freeze, and you're able to get talent that way. That being said, it's also a temporary, I think, part of the cycle. In a year or two, you may again have to compete a lot more with larger companies. And at that point, you set on the vision. And, if you truly believe what you're doing, you use a good tech stack, you use innovative technologies, a lot of software engineers will really be attracted by that. 5 years ago, that's what attracted me at joining Unify, my previous company. So I think that's a good value prop. And you still need to pay people what they're worth, of course. Incentivization on the stock option is also very important. Like I still think the UK tech startups are a bit behind compared to what you see in terms of incentivization programs in the US. So I think making sure you give equity to your early employees or share options to your early employees is definitely key to attract the right talent.
G, you've mentioned a few times that this isn't your first time you've built your own company. What is it which attracts you to entrepreneurship? Why is it you wanted to do it again? And another question on top of that, for everyone that's listening, perhaps the people looking to go into kind of building their own startup now, can anyone be an entrepreneur?
I think anyone can nowadays, but it depends also you define entrepreneurship, right? You can be a solo entrepreneur. And I think especially now, that's why I'm saying anyone can do it, because there are a lot of tools out there that allow you to be a lot bigger than you would have been 10 years ago if you were solo entrepreneur. But whether it's software solutions or it's, spot on contractors and various platforms where you can get someone expert in a particular area for just a month to help you out. I think now everyone can, whether or not everyone should. I still think, it's not the most rational proposition in most time. It's a lot more pressure.
Okay.
Yeah, people you employ that you're responsible for. You also have investors potentially if you took on investment on board, and you still have some responsibilities there and people to answer to. It's a lot more stress, a lot more work, but I think there are a few things that are as rewarding as entrepreneurship, especially in the tech world. And I've never learned more than when I have done businesses. I would say anyone can. And I think if anyone wants to try, I do think it's never been easier. However, I would say it's often from a place of privilege that you can start businesses. You need to potentially have the network, have the savings, and not everyone can have access to that. And I think I think it's important to recognize that it's not equal access or equal opportunity when it comes to entrepreneurship still now, although there are various places that try to help kind of underrepresented community. I do still think that, I'm very privileged to be able to do it in the first place. And I know not everyone has a financial situation or social situation that allows them to do that.
And I know it helps so much when you've got your co-founder with you. And as you've said, this is not the first time you've been with your co-founder in a business as well. So
that's true. Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me a little bit more about this closing year. So we've got about 2.5 months, I guess, left of the year. Tell me a little bit about what would you regard your year as successful, and what do you need to do before the close of the year to regard it even more successful?
I think in some aspects I'd regard the year as successful because the team we have by the end of the year, I think it's an incredible team, and I'm super proud and happy to work with the team that we have. I think the product we have is actually quite innovative. And we've managed to do that in a fairly competitive space with a lot of bigger players out there, and we have paying customers. That being said, to make it more successful, I want more users, I want more paying customers, and I want to have a lot more integrations in our platform than we currently have. So that, there is definitely more, we want more money, more revenue, more proof that there is a genuine product market fit in everything we're doing. But I'm super happy of what we managed to build so far. And especially the team that we built around it, and also our investors. We're closing in on our seed round at the moment, and I'm really super happy when I see the investor and the people that believe in us. So it is absolutely a success in my mind. But there's always more we can do.
If you could, 2 more questions for you, G. If you could invite any businessman, anyone in the world to come and work for you, who would be the 2 business leaders, experts you would choose, and why?
To work with me or for me?
Work for you, your business.
For me. That's a bit different. I think actually there are a couple of companies I greatly admire in the space, and I can't know for sure who is responsible for the success. So I'm going to say, I'm going to be quite broad in terms of the people, but there is a company called Segment in the tech space, which I greatly admire and how they executed the product that they built. They were also in somewhat the integration space. And I loved how it became a product that engineers used to sell, and it wasn't sold by like CTOs and CPOs to their engineering team. It was often the opposite. I myself, actually, if I was pushing leadership, like, let's use Segment. So I think the executive team at Segment did an incredible job. Unfortunately, I don't know, it could be the chief product officer at the time or the CEO, but I think they're one of the examples that I look for when I'm building a company. They've sold for billions to Twilio, which is also a great company, by the way. And in terms of actual, maybe individual, I really like the CEO, as in when I say like, I think he's done great things. The CEO of Versal, which is a very technical product, hosting product. But I really like
Versal.
Versal. So I think they've done a couple of great things from a marketing standpoint. Also, their product developer experience has been great. And I actually look up to him and to the rest of the Versal team when it comes to developer relationship management. DevRel, essentially, I think they've done a great job there to educate the market and to create kind of a market as well around around Next.js and the hosting platform they provide. And I think as we are developing also a fairly developer-focused product, I really want and I really like this idea of really attracting engineers first and selling the value prop to the engineers, them recognizing that it's a good product and eventually adopting it, getting adoption that way, which is very different to what we are doing right now at the start.
That's true. Okay. And last question for you. I always give this one recently over the last couple of weeks to our guests. What would you like your legacy to be?
I think there are two responses to that, or two aspects to that. One is the legacy to actually just the people I work with, to the people I guess I network with as well, the people I employ, the people that work with me. I want them to kind of remember StackOne as a great place to have worked at. Like, they learned a lot, they enjoyed their time. It's like at the end of the day, it's truly I'm really trying to create an environment that fosters innovation, but people like each other and people like working here. And I think that's important, regardless of the business aspect or what StackOne do. But of course, more importantly, I'd love for it if by the end, I left StackOne and I joined a tech company, and it's like they use StackOne. And whatever tech company I look at is like, hey, they have to build integrations, so they use StackOne. Actually, the legacy that we managed to help every software connect each other, I think that's kind of our vision, and that would be insanely massive. I think the productivity gains that a lot of companies would gain by using a technology like StackOne, there may be better future competitors, but right now, that would be a great legacy to have. I would really emphasize the being a good employer, being a good company for people that they can grow, they can end up building their own companies themselves and have an amazing journey also in the future somewhere else potentially, and building their own companies. I'd love to create more entrepreneurs out of my team as well, because it's been a journey that I really love, and I hope other people can also experience it.
I love that. I think that's amazing. I think it's so important when you're looking after your team and giving them that kind of motivation and knowledge to go and do exactly the same as you. So amazing. Thank you, G, for coming on. It's been really interesting to pick your brain and to see everything that you've been doing at StackOne as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Matt.